Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue questioning of Mr. Lydon.
My name is Art Batsky. I'm a professional engineer and have questions about energy, which I don't know if they're included.
Can anyone hear the back?
He is in Victor, A-T-S-K-Y. I don't know if they're included, the questions are already included in the master plan. I think not.
So you're going to ask questions of this planner about energy?
I'm going to ask questions.
What did you say you're going to ask him questions about?
Energy.
No, sorry. You're going to ask him questions about what he's testifying to. There's nothing more than that.
I can ask a question about the appliances in the building.
Well, let's hear what the question is about. Let's see if this is appropriate. It doesn't seem that way, but let's at least hear your first question.
My first question is this an energy, wait, is this a LEED certified building?
I don't know, I'm not the architect.
Next question.
Next question. Will the apartments have Energy Star appliances?
I don't know, I'm not the purchasing engineer.
He's a planner, sir, Mr. What's your name? Vatsky. I think this is the planner. He talks about the appropriateness of the structure in the site, the impact, on everything. So I don't think that, and he can only testify to things he's an expert in. He's not an expert in electric and energy
He testified that there would not be electric vehicle chargers in the structure.
what did he testify to?
Electric vehicle chargers, to charge electric cars.
He read the plans, I think, and saw there were no stalls for electrical chargers for electrical cars. I think is that a fair statement, Mr. Lydon?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
What was the statement?
That when somebody asked him about this electrical car issue, I think one of the board members, and I think the testimony, unless I'm mistaken, was at the time that when he had examined the plans, it did not seem like there were stalls for electrical chargers.
That's right, and I'm not in agreement with that.
Well, he said that, right? I can argue with him, but that's what he said.
That's what you said. And we don't know if it's LEED certified, and we don't know if there's going to be a solar PV on the top of the building. That's the outside part of the building.
I'm not aware of that.
Is there going to be any electric battery reserve in case we lose electric power to the building, so that there will be power to the apartments?
Yeah, I'm not the architect, I don't know.
Huh?
He's not an architect, he doesn't know, he says.
He's not the chief of the plans?
No, he's not an architect, he's a planner.
Okay.
Thank you.
How do we get those answers?
There was an architect here at prior meetings, and that was the appropriate time to ask of the architect what kind of design he had made for those kind of... I'm sorry?
The name of the architect?
Yeah, you can give them. Ms. Berger will give you the name. What's the name of the architect, Ms. Berger, that testified here?
I believe Mr. Walker, Ralph Walker testified.
Just speak a little louder.
Ralph Walker testified.
If he comes to office Monday, I can give you the information.
And you have access to the plans if you want to, sir. You You have access to the plans. If you want to go down to the building department, I'm sure they will let you see the plans. Yes, these plans. They're public. Next person. This is the beach. The Turning Beach. Good evening, Mr. Beach.
Put the microphone close to your mouth, please.
Not that one, the one you have in your hand.
The one in your hand.
No, the one in your hand is the one that's working. Forget about that one. That's a
Can we
fake
see
one.
if we can get this mounted so I don't have to hold it?
Wait one second.
I don't think it's gonna be the best way to work for him. I think it's simple to put his back into
James Beach, Teaneck.
Last name, spell it, please.
V-E-A-C-H. Mr. Lydon, I want to focus on your credentials a little bit, okay?
Sure.
You attended Rutgers University, correct?
Correct.
And you got a degree in environmental planning and design.
Correct.
Does your testimony before the board touch on how the construction of this 68-unit apartment building with an adjacent parking lot will affect the environment?
To some degree it does.
In what degree?
I talked about the fact that in this particular location, there is opportunity to use mass transit.
Are you testifying that this building will give the transit people more business?
I'm testifying that it's an opportunity, that there is an opportunity, a very practical and available opportunity for residents of this building, if the board approves it, to use New Jersey Transit bus service.
You testified, and you brought before the board tonight, you testified about photographs you took in the area. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
While you were there taking those photographs, did you have occasion to get on a 167 or 168 bus?
Did I get on that bus? No, I did not.
Have you ever ridden the 167 or the 168 to the Port Authority at 7 or 8 in the morning from Teaneck?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever tried to get home from the Port Authority on 167 and 168 to Teaneck at 5, 6, or 7 o'clock in the evening?
No, I haven't.
Now, if I understand it right, this building is going to generate more sewage, is that right?
I didn't testify to it.
Fine. So even though you have a background in environmental planning, you're not testifying here today with respect to sewage.
No, I'm not.
You're not testifying about the number of trees.
That's correct.
You're not touching.
He's the planner. Ask him questions about being the planner.
I'm trying to narrow down his credentials.
No. He's the planner. Stop asking. You should know better than don't ask him questions outside of his field. His field is planning, not architecture, not environmental design, not sewage, not engineering. Sorry. Usually he should ask him questions about his field, sir, and the question, and what.
Let me go to his testimony.
Thank you.
Let's talk about economics a little bit, okay? In your testimony, sir, you used the term feet on the street.
I did.
What were you trying to get across?
People spend a certain amount of money on expenditures every year. Restaurant money, card shops, pizza places, and one of the things we have noticed in the planning field is a lot of municipality downtowns are suffering. And one of the ways we are thinking of trying to revitalize some of those areas is by broadening the potential uses. And another way, which a lot of municipalities are doing, is they are introducing residential housing into commercial areas because people, generally speaking, will shop in a convenient location. And oftentimes it's convenient to where they work, or where they play, or where they live. So with that theory in planning circles these days, a lot of municipalities are amending their zoning codes to introduce residential uses into commercial areas. In Teaneck's particular case, we have a multifamily residential zone, which happens to be very conveniently located to not just one commercial area, but two.
But you're closer to the plaza, correct?
You're close to both.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
You are closer to the plaza at 100 State Street. Isn't that correct?
Then what?
Closer than what?
This gentleman just testified that there are two
Just
business districts.
Mr. Beach, you're an attorney. You know, try to ask a question so the record is complete. If you say, I don't have to teach you how to ask questions, but
Well, maybe you do.
Oh, okay, so then you teach me, then I think the record will be much clearer and you get a better question and a better answer that you can use for something.
Excellent. 100 State Street, are those people living in 100 State Street, if it is built, are they closer to the plaza or Teaneck Road?
They're close to both. I have not measured the number of feet from one to the other, but they are close to both commercial areas.
Sir, aren't they closer to the plaza than Teaneck Road?
Mr. Beach, he just answered that. He said he didn't measure. He gave his answer. What's the next question?
So you can't tell us, as you sit here today, whether those people are closer to the plaza or Teaneck Road?
I direct my client not to answer the
Well,
question.
he's not your client, he's an expert.
It's
Don't worry about
an
it.
answer over and over.
Ms. Berger, the word is objection.
Okay.
Sustained. Next question.
Have you spoken to any of the business owners in the plaza about 100 State Street?
No,
Have you spoken to any members of the Township Council about 100 State Street?
yes,
Who?
council people.
Who?
Mr. Pruitt, Councilman Pruitt,
Dr. Pruitt?
yes,
Who else?
I believe he's the only one.
What did you talk about?
The project,
What did he say to you and you say to him?
he wondered who was going to live in the project, if you want to call it a project, the development. He asked how it would compete with other particular developments in the area. He asked about certain features that the property may or may not have.
And what did you say?
I answered him.
So if he asked you about how this project, his term, how this project compared to other projects in the area, is he talking about 1500 Palisade Avenue? Was he talking about those other projects?
I'm going to object because the purpose of the cross-examination is based upon his direct testimony and not about anything further.
I will give Mr. Beach, even though he's an
I
attorney, I'll give him a little leeway. But I think you're getting a little out of the direct testimony. There's a scope there, you know that, Mr. Beach. So let's tread lightly. So can you formulate the question maybe a little tighter and maybe Mr. You're talking about what Dr. Pruitt discussed with Mr. Light, which wasn't in the testimony either, but I'll give you that opportunity to question Mr. Light about that.
So when he asked you about how you would compare 100 State Street to other projects in the vicinity, what did you say?
Did he ask him about that? Mr. Lydon? Was that a question that Dr. Pruitt asked him?
I don't think so.
If you want to talk and make comments, you'll have a chance to come to the mic.
All right. Go ahead.
Where did you have this conversation?
Through the chair. If he had a conversation outside the board, it's not due to his testimony. Through the chair, it's inappropriate to ask him questions about conversations he had outside his testimony. He has testified to this board. This point is to question him about his testimony.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm trying to do is focus on his prior testimony and his testimony today, in which he has talked about coming to this area, taking photographs, walking around the neighborhood, and now he's talked to a member of the Township Council, and I would like to know if he was standing at that location in the plaza when he had that conversation.
Okay, that's a fair question.
No, I was not.
Where's the one the telephone?
Mr. Beach, Attorney Beach, I think that we are. Where are we going with this? What is your proffer of these questions?
I'm trying to focus on the testimony, which I believe is something to the effect that putting all these people at 100 State Street would generate more business and feet on the street.
Okay, so what does that to do with the conversation with Dr. Pruitt, who's a council member?
I would like to know if Dr. Pruitt was also interested in feet on the street.
Why don't you ask Dr. Pruitt? Go, after the meeting, you can ask Dr. Pruitt. What does that to do with this witness?
Well, but I would like to ask this witness.
And, by the way,
That was his testimony.
Wait. Now, you heard me speak a couple times, one person at a time. It hasn't changed. One person at a time.
First of all, I believe that when you ask what Dr. Pruitt said, isn't that what we call hearsay? Did we learn that in the first year of law school?
Is this a criminal trial?
No, but it's rules of evidence, and certainly you as an attorney are held to a greater standard than a regular layperson. So let's move on.
Are you aware, sir, if any members of the Township Council own commercial properties in the plaza?
What's the question again? Are you aware? I'm sorry, Ms. Berger, I'm going to make an objection. Okay, so let me hear the question one more time.
Asking this witness
Yes.
whether he is aware if any members of the Township Council own commercial and rental properties in the plaza.
If he's aware, let him answer.
I'm going to object because it was not part of the direct testimony, and we're really going far afield here.
I understand, but I'll allow the question.
No.
There you go. Next question, Mr. Beach.
I think you testified that you've appeared before the Teaneck Board of Adjustment before, correct?
Correct.
How many times?
I don't know.
Give me an idea, a rough approximation.
I don't know.
Could it be 100 times?
I don't know.
You testified about Hillview, a 7-apartment complex, do you recall that?
Excuse me, I didn't quite hear you.
You testified about Hillview, a unit that has, an apartment building has 7 units. It came up in the context of the education questions. And you said, well, maybe it's not 6, 7, maybe the owner slipped in another apartment. Do you recall that?
1387 Hill Street. Yes. I did say something about that tonight.
All right. Is that in Teaneck?
Yes, it is.
Did you appear before the Board of Adjustment in connection with that property?
Yes, I did.
Who was the developer?
I don't recall.
Is it the same developer that's doing 100 State Street?
No.
Now, you testified, I believe, tonight that you also were involved with respect to 1500 Teaneck Road.
Correct.
Who was the developer?
I don't recall.
Mr. Beach, it is not really relevant who the developer is on a different property. We hear from his expertise as to planning. That's where you need to go in detail and cross-examine the witness. That's where you score the points. You don't score the points by trying to figure out how many times Mr. Lydon, who is a very well-known planner in Bergen County, has testified before this board or any other boards. I know Mr. Lydon has been testifying before this board as long as I can remember. And I've been on this board for 23 or 22 years. I've served on behalf of the town. So I know Mr. Lydon. So I understand. I could not tell you how many times he's been before this board or other boards I've been before. We have seen Mr. Lydon as well. So you got to score points. You want to score points? Go to the essence of his testimony, which is which are the issues that he brought up. How the planning conforms, the master plan, whatever you think is appropriate. But that's where you score the points, not about how many times he testified before this point. It doesn't help you. If you want to help yourself, that's where you go after.
Sir, isn't it true that you concluded that both of those buildings, the 1500 and the Hill Street, should be built as the developer wished?
He never testified.
He can't testify. every application that comes before this board, every application that comes before this board reaches a standalone application. His testimony in other boards is not influential or prejudicial in any way.
Ryan, I want you to get a
Can you get
microphone
in?
too, because she couldn't hear you.
Every application that comes before a board is a standalone application. Meaning that any time he's testified before this board, it's not prejudicial or influential upon the present application. It's an inappropriate question, sir.
Just one more question, I'll move on. Do you recall ever testifying in front of the Board of Adjustment to the effect that a building the developer wanted built should not be built?
It's the same.
I'm going to object to the question. It has no relevancy to his direct
I'll allow it.
No.
Thank you. How many assignments has Burgess Associates taken from Cole Shots?
I'm going to object to the question.
Now you objecting? Sustain. Next question.
Have you ever turned down an assignment from Cole Shots?
I'm objecting to the
Sustain.
question.
There's a Master of City and Regional Planning, an MCRP. What is that?
I'm objecting to the question. It has nothing to do with his direct testimony.
I'll allow it.
It's a degree that Rutgers and other schools grant.
But you don't have one.
Correct.
That's a degree given by the Blaustein School, correct?
I'm going to object.
Sustain.
On page 3, or rather from the Burgess Associates webpage, the company you worked for, withdrawn. You've worked for Burgess for 18 years, correct?
That's correct.
They have a listing of principals and associates on the website, correct?
I've never gone to the website.
You've never looked at your own website?
No.
Do you have a licensed landscape architect with Burgess?
I'm going to object. It has no relevancy to his direct testimony.
Mr. Beach, we want to score points. I can work directly what to do, but you know better.
Well, just to clarify, so we have no more confusion going down, I just want to make sure. I think I've got this. You're not an architect, right?
Mr. Beach, he's come before this board as a planner. Asking questions about being a planner.
You could be a planner and an architect.
He's here to testify as a planner, sir.
Well, let's just confirm that he's not an architect, because he has testified about these buildings. He says, oh, this building is outdated, this building is beautiful, this building is ugly. Just want to clarify that he is not an architect.
An architect.
I am not an architect.
He is not an architect.
And you are not an engineer.
I'm going to object again. His testimony was he's a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, and that is how he testified.
And you're not an economist.
I'm not a cook.
You're not an economist.
Objection.
Sustain. Next question.
Now, the Burgess firm has been around since 1988, correct?
I don't know.
You don't know how long your firm's been around?
I object. You asked the question, he answered the question.
Sustain.
The firm identifies clients that engage in, quote, residential development, right?
Object. It has no relevance to his direct testimony.
I haven't gone to the website. I don't know what it says.
Show you your own website. The we mark is Beach 3.
No, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. It has no relevancy to his direct questioning. The board has already accepted him and accepted his qualifications as a licensed planner. That was the scope of his testimony.
Sustained.
Mr. Chairman, I want to explore whether there are conflicts of interest here, and I want to also explore the capacity in which Burgess has given testimony on both sides of the street for years. I want to explore what the Burgess firm has been doing since 1988 with respect to representing both municipalities on the one side and corporate entities on the other side.
But that's not appropriate for this witness at this time. I'm sorry, how can he's not Mr. Burgess? You want to subpoena Mr. Burgess in this matter?
I think that would be great.
Well, you can do what sir, you're an attorney. You know very well how to present a case, or should know very well how to present a case. But I don't think it's appropriate for this witness to come as a planner to testify on this application about the firm that he works for.
All right. This witness has testified about Avalon Bay. Sir, doesn't Burgess Associates do work for Avalon Properties, Avalon Bay?
I don't think so.
Would you be surprised to know that your website says so?
I haven't gone to my website. I don't know how many times you want me to say that. I have not looked at our website.
Could I show him, refresh him perhaps, and show him his own website? No.
You have to ask him questions about his testimony. This is cross-examination. Stop, sir. This is cross-examination about his testimony that is given his board. That has nothing to do with it.
He has testified several times tonight about Avalon Bay and the structure they put up on Windsor Road.
He used it as a comparison. Whether his firm did work there or not, it has no relevance to this board. The questions must be related to the testimony he gave. Just because he mentioned Avalon Bay doesn't give you the right to ask him all kinds of weird questions.
How about this question? He testified
No, ask
that
him a question.
Avalon Properties was Avalon Bay was so many feet high. How do you know that?
I was using the ordinance that the township council adopted.
You didn't go over and look at it?
No.
Do you know whether there's a large parking lot built, parking structure built next to Avalon Bay?
Objection, and no relevant, not direct, part of the direct testimony.
I haven't been there. I don't know.
Your firm, Burgess, has done work for a lot of townships, correct?
I'm going to object because it's not
Sustained.
his firm.
Sustained.
Do you know Mr. Price?
I'm going to object.
Ask if you know which Mr. Price.
The town planner, Mr. Price?
I'm going to object. There's no relevancy to this.
Overruled. You know it?
Yes, I know Mr. Price.
How long have you known him?
Objection. I'm going to make the objection. And I'm going to sustain my own.
Have you worked with Mr. Price on any projects?
Mr. Beach, you got to move on. Next question.
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to explore whether there is a relationship, perhaps too cozy, between the township's planner and the paid planner hired by the developer in this case.
I refer you to the opportunity to take an appeal on that issue. I'm going to sustain.
Yeah, Mr. Beach, Mr. Lydon was qualified early on in the process. That would have been the appropriate time for you to question his credentials and question his, in your mind, potential conflict of interest. I think that is, you're beating this horse to death. Mr. Lydon has been accepted by this board, and we're looking upon his testimony as expert testimony. And I believe that you're wasting our time and the public's time.
So you can hire your own expert and bring your own expert next time. And now we have his testimony on transcripts. You hire your own expert in the field of planning, who's a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, and he goes to town. That's the way to do it. Score some points. If you
Could you give me some money for that?
I'm sorry?
Could you make a contribution for me to do that, hire a planner?
That's an inappropriate question.
Mr. Rosen, this is the first time I've had a chance to ask this witness any questions. I'll move on. But how could I challenge his qualifications.
Sorry, any
This
more
is my
questions?
first time asking him questions.
Well, the public always has the opportunity to question somebody's eligibility to be an expert. That is the way we always work. Well, I don't know whether you were here that day, but all of our expert witnesses are repeatedly questioned by the attorney, whether it's current attorney, or whether it's any other attorney that's been on this board. And even when we know that applicant, that expert is well known to us, we still have to go through the process of questioning his eligibility. We have done that weeks ago, maybe months ago. It is inappropriate in my mind, and I believe my colleagues, to pursue a line of questioning that relates to this expert witness when we've already verified he's an expert witness. So please continue.
Mr. Lydon, what is spot zoning?
I object to the question. There's no relevance to his direct.
Spot zoning is a term used in zoning law.
What does it mean?
It means a action of the mayor and council in adopting a zoning ordinance that is not supported by the master plan.
So it's when the mayor and council changes the zoning code?
Yes.
Now, I thought you said earlier that the mayor and council had done X and Y with respect to certain properties here in town. You recall that?
Yes, I recall that.
Are you saying that's spot zoning?
No, I never said that.
Are you familiar with the term zoning by variance?
I've heard it used.
What does it mean?
I think it means whatever the person who's using the term means it to be.
So if I say, so in other words, would you agree that an application for 12 variances, if that were granted, wouldn't that be an example of zoning by variance?
I don't think so, not necessarily.
You've given examples of other properties nearby where either the Board of Adjustment or the mayor and council, in your word, has allowed buildings to be built that don't comply with Teaneck zoning code.
That's incorrect, I did not say that.
The building on the Verizon building on Teaneck Road, was that area zoned for 5 stories originally?
I don't know.
What about the building on Queen Anne Road that you brought pictures to? You had pictures of that building, and you brought them here tonight. How did that developer get permission to go up to 7 stories?
You submitted an application to the Board of Adjustment, they heard all the testimony, they heard from the public, if there was any public, and they granted an approval.
So if you go around town and you find buildings in an area that's 3 stories high, 2-story, 3-story, 2-story, 3-story, and suddenly you see buildings that are 5-story and 7-story, isn't that an example of zoning by variance?
Not necessarily.
Are you familiar with the case Caro, C-A-R-O versus 28 McWhorter, LLC?
Can't say I am.
Are you familiar with a New Jersey Supreme Court case, Burbridge versus Mine Hill?
Yes, that was something to do with a recycling center and auto sales yard, I believe.
I'm going to quote you a portion of a sentence from that
I'm
decision.
going to object to this line of questioning. It doesn't have relevancy with regard to the direct testimony of this witness.
I'm going to sustain that objection. If you have an issue that lends itself to a legal argument, you are more than welcome to submit a brief.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
I think that will be the appropriate way to do it. If there's this is the time where you have to question Mr. Lydon, not about his ability to process a legal case. If there's this issue that you want to bring up that is legal of nature, that is case that has relevance, that has been overlooked, then submit a brief. And we'll take that under consideration.
Mr. Chairman, this witness tonight took it upon himself to cite several cases. And then he went on to explain his interpretation of those cases and what they held. You recall that?
I recall.
Having opened that door, having held himself out as somebody who knows something about case law in New Jersey on property rights, I think I have a right to ask him questions about some other cases.
Yeah, but the way that you do that is not the way to do it, because that is an issue of briefing a specific case where there's an opportunity for Ms. Berger to respond, because you're taking, if you want to read the entire case, from the Supreme Court of the entire case, with all the facts and all the opinions and so on, then I think it's appropriate, and we're not going to do that because that's not the process we do, but that's why we have briefs. So if it's a legal issue that has something to do with case law, the appropriate way would be submit a brief. Ms. Berger will submit a reply brief, and we'll take it into consideration. And if you need to have an opposition to the brief, a response, and you can have a reply. Maybe that's a good way to do that. Why don't we then do that? And Mr. Lydon's testimony is still open. I'm sure we're not going to finish all the questions that everybody have here tonight from Mr. Lydon. So then,
I would move to strike the testimony he gave tonight, where he cited and in a long-winded fashion talked about case law. I didn't jump up in the audience and say I object. He didn't submit a brief. I request respectfully that you take his testimony where he cites case law as if he were a lawyer. Take it out of the record.
So you can put that as a point in your brief. And of course, you're going to give me the reasons why that has to be cut out and the proper legal authority. And then, our lawyer will look at it and advise us as to the legalities and the appropriateness of striking part of the transcript for any other remedy that's available.
At page 108 in your transcript, previous testimony, you testified...
Transcript, Mr. Attorney Beach. Transcript, which transcript? There's a few transcripts.
The transcript of his testimony.
Okay, so we're talking about the transcript that was May 16th?
Correct.
Okay, good.
On page 108, you testified that this property...
What line?
I don't have the line. You testified that this property has 300 feet frontage and goes back 115 feet, correct?
One second. I'm looking at page 108.
I don't think so.
Sir, did you testify, I think, at the very beginning of your testimony in May, didn't you talk about this building, this area was deed restricted?
I couldn't hear your question.
Don't you recall your testimony on May 16th when you talked about the medical deed restriction on this property?
I did talk about the deed restriction on the property.
If that deed restriction had not been lifted, we would not be here tonight, would we?
I have no idea.
Well, we would be talking about a medical building.
Because he's arguing with the witness as to the witness.
Ask him questions about his testimony, sir.
You testified that there was a deed restriction for medical uses only on these 3 lots, correct?
I think the deed restriction was only on the one lot.
Only on 1 lot. And that meant that it could be, you could use that lot only to construct buildings for medical uses, correct?
I'm going to object with regard to the question. He's giving his interpretation.
I understand, and I'm looking at the transcript, and it's also incorrect, but there was a deed restriction, according to the testimony. So it says it was a deed restriction at the time, I believe was for office and medical office space.
Right.
So, but regardless, for medical and medical office space.
Right.
I'm sorry, office or medical office space. And that was on page 108 of the transcript. Mr. Vinci, move on.
Medical office space. That deed restriction.
No, that's not what I said. I read it, it said office or medical office space.
That was his testimony.
Okay?
Right. Are you aware that an application, someone made an application to the township council to lift that deed restriction?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Who asked the council to lift the restriction?
The problem I have for the chair is that a deed restriction is not within the purview of this body. A deed restriction falls within the applicant to deal with on his own. And if he has issues with his deed, then he can go deal with it. That has nothing to do with this body. Deed restrictions are an applicant issue and not something that this body can decide on. It has no purpose to be discussed or be in front of this body or heard or discussed.
Mr. Chairman, I'm simply trying to explore something that this witness raised.
So what's the profit of those questions? Where are you going with those questions? In the 60s, apparently, there was, I wasn't around, much younger. In the 60s, there were a deed restriction imposed on this property to build something. And then sometime between that time and today, the deed restriction was removed.
Roz, do you have my exhibits from the previous testimony?
They're all here.
Oh, here. Could I see exhibits 1 and 2, H1 and 2?
Exhibit 1 is all.
Your exhibits?
Yes. If they're here, may I see them?
Your,
No. I had
you'll
two.
probably be in, this will take a while to find them, but I can tell you for the deed restrictions have to go through the county. Township of Teaneck cannot live the deed restriction. It's different to the county. So if you want information on that, you need to contact the county, register the deed.
Let's move on. Next question is the.
I offer, and here's my problem.
Yeah.
We have a resolution of the Township Council lifting the deed restriction. I introduced it into evidence. A resolution of the Township Council.
And therefore,
And here's my problem. I want to know who went to the council to get that done.
why don't you?
That is an issue for, bring up with the council. That is an issue for the council, and the deed restrictions or the lifting of the deed restrictions or any property rights of the applicant is issues for either the council or the applicant. That has nothing to do with the application here. Move on.
You're aware that there are medical offices, a couple of them, near 100 State Street, are you not?
As I sit here now, I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware that there's one on Queen Anne and also one on Ayers Court?
I'm going to object.
Sustained.
Do you know if the township of Teaneck was paid anything for lifting the deed restriction?
I'm going to object again.
Sustained.
These exhibits are not in this file, so they will be in the file of the office.
Ross, that's okay. That's all right. That's okay, thank you. Now, on page 115 in your prior testimony, you referred to the 2007 master plan. And you referred to a provision in the plan that talks about revitalizing old office buildings or using abandoned office buildings. Do you recall that?
Generally, I'm not sure of the specifics.
Now, that was,
You have a quote there?
I do not have a quote, but I have one coming on. I don't have the one, it's page 115. And I'll make a profit. I'm not trying to get down in the weeds here. What I'm trying to do is explore whether this expert is cherry picking the master plan and the re-examination of the master plan. In other words,
Sir,
whether he is only citing things favorable.
Sir, you're going to have a chance to make a statement at the end. This is a chance for you to ask questions. Ask the question.
I'm trying to do that.
Go ahead, ask the
Could
question.
you ask the question again, because we don't know what
There
it
is
was?
no question.
There's no question.
Oh, I got confused.
Do you recall testifying generally, last time and this time, about how the master plan encourages the revitalization or abandonment of old office buildings?
Could you specify which master plan?
Well, let's start with 2007.
Yes, it talks about that.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Now, let's stay with the master plan. I want you to focus on page 2 of the 2007. Page 2 of the 2007 master plan issued on April 12, 2007. I want you to look at goal number 3 on page number 2. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Does it not say, provide zoning protection for existing multifamily housing and encourage its expansion only in areas where it would not have detrimental effects on single-family residential neighbors? Do you see that? Close quote.
Yes, I do.
Those are 2 independent clauses, are they not?
It's one goal. I don't necessarily read it as 2 clauses.
This long sentence contains 2 independent clauses, does it not?
I'm going to object, he already answered
He
the question.
asked an answer and said no. Next question.
Here's the first independent clause.
I'm going to object, he already answered the question.
I think you're arguing with the witness. He said, you asked him a question, and he answered no. So you can't ask him again. It doesn't make, it's not going to change his mind.
I don't think he understood my question.
Well, I think I understood it. I understood his answer. And you know what? The record will reflect your question and his answer.
No, it won't, because he's not answering my question.
Okay.
Not answering your question, not answering the question the way you like it is 2 different things.
The first part of that sentence, provide zoning protection for existing multifamily housing, comma. Do you see that?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It wants to ensure that there are zoning protections for existing multifamily houses.
Exactly. In other words, doesn't that mean that the existing multifamily apartment buildings surrounding 100 State Street should have zoning protection? In other words, they shouldn't have 5-story buildings hanging over them when they're 3-story buildings.
I'm going to object to the question. First of all, it was a statement, it wasn't a question. He did not, this is not regarding all the buildings in the area. It's a master plan for the township of Teaneck. And it's 4 words you picked out of a master plan.
It's a statement.
All right, let's look at 2017. That's the re-examination report. And I want to direct your attention to goal number 3.
Do you have a copy?
Look at it. I'm going to show you page 4
Can I see the document?
of the 2017 Master Plan Reexamination Report and direct your attention to, under goals, number 3. Could you read that?
I'm sorry, I did not pay attention.
I'm going to object
Okay, I don't know,
Any other question?
I didn't hear the question, we were having a little discussion here about, some management
Let's
issue.
have the question right back.
Yes, maybe. Go ahead. Thank you.
Of the 2017 master plan re-examination report, I direct your attention to under goals, number 3. Could you read that?
I'm going to object. This is not the document purported to be given to me. He stated that was the master plan from 2017. The document given to me is the proposed master plan.
It is not the proposed master plan. It is the proposed 2017 master plan re-examination.
Well, I think, Mr. Leach, do you know that particular proposed master plan examination was adopted by the governing body?
I hope so. It's on the website of the Township of Teaneck.
Do you know if it was adopted?
I have no idea.
So-
This comes from the township website.
It's the proposed plan, so it hasn't been adopted. Next question.
All right, with your permission, I would like to read under objective goals on page 4, number 3.
I'm going to object.
Stay. You can submit that in your brief as well.
We're trying to ask questions here. There'll be time for a brief, I understand. I don't know if anybody's going to submit one, but this isn't the time for questions, not briefing.
Well, the issues that you say, if this proposed plan has been adopted by the township, the way you say it is, maybe I'll have Mr. Lydon come back and answer your questions. That's the beauty of this part. If you brief it right, and you brief a nice brief that is coherent and have the supporting law behind it, I may ask Ms. Berger to recall Mr. Lydon to answer your questions. So we're not, missing anything that you're entitled to. And that's the beauty of this proceeding. We don't want to get you something or give you something more than you're entitled to, but not less.
You've testified, sir.
Do you think that's, Mr. V, do you think that's fair?
No.
No? Why not?
I don't. I think that we should.
Don't you think it's fair I give you all the opportunities to cross-examine this witness?
I think that we should-
I am speaking one at a time, please. And not because I don't care that you speak over me, but mostly for the court of law. I'm trying to be fair. And if I can make mistakes too. So if I'm mistaken about this issue about the proposed master plan, who I don't believe is a law or adopted by the governing body, if I'm wrong, I will give you the opportunity to come back and cross-examine Mr. Lydon on that particular issue.
That's fair.
Okay,
Thank you.
so that's fair. I'm trying to help you, so don't fight me. I'm helping you.
That's fair. Mr. Lydon, were you involved with the writing of the 2007 master plan in Teaneck?
No,
Do you know how much resident input went into the 2000 master
I'm
plan?
going to object to this question.
Mr. Lydon, you're an expert in this area. You know what a re-examination of the master plan is, don't you?
yes,
The re-examination of Teaneck's 2000 master plan, who did it?
I'm going to object. It has no relevancy with regard to the direct testimony.
Was there any resident input into the 2017 re-examination of the
Sir, you have to
2007?
ask, sir, you have to ask him questions about the application to which he testified. Asking him about a master plan that is not in front of this board.
He testified about the master plan.
He testified about the master plan as it applies to the application. That doesn't give you the right to ask him everything about that master plan. It has to be relevant to his testimony.
Mr.
Second
Chairman,
time now I've said this.
Mr. Chairman, here's my problem. I'm trying to establish, maybe we can just concede this, that the 2007 master plan involved a lot of resident input.
Then you can make
And the
statements.
2017 re-examination and the 2014 re-examination did not.
And you can make statements about that. And you can make statements about that and give you a chance to make a statement. You are here to cross-examine him, counsel, about his testimony.
I would ask that that be stricken from the record because it has no relevancy to this.
At this point, I'm not going to strike anything from the record. I don't think it's relevant. So, what the public said at one point in time was vis-a-vis this witness's testimony today, but I don't see the connection.
May I read a section from the 2007 master plan?
No, sir, you have a
that
chance,
relates
sir.
to this particular property?
Counsel, you have a chance to make a statement at the end. You have a question for this witness.
You know, I think you may be right. I may be wasting my time asking this witness.
We haven't asked
many
an
more questions.
appropriate question.
Now, so you testified today in May, in the middle of May, you testified about whether the parking spaces allotted to this unit, this building, are sufficient. Do you recall that?
Yes, it is.
And I think you said here tonight that 100 spaces were enough for this building, 100 spaces.
Based on the engineer's review memo.
And I believe you testified that the lot across the street, on the other side of State Street, would be surplus, not necessary, but nice to have.
There was a question. It was a little convoluted.
I'm sorry, I was...
The question was something to that effect that Mr. Beach, maybe I can help you. Isn't it true, sir, you testified today that the site would generate 100 spaces and it would be nice to have another 44 spaces across the street on the site that the developer wants. Something to that effect.
Well,
Is that fair, Mr. Beach?
Something like that.
I think my testimony was that the traffic report prepared by the township engineer was that the 100 stalls that are proposed on this particular site are more than sufficient for the parking demand generated by this proposed development, and that the stalls across the street can function for public parking. I believe that's what my testimony was.
And I believe you testified at pages 135 and 36, I don't have a line, that you testified about a Hoboken study on parking. And you said that one parking space per unit would be sufficient. Do you recall that?
Yes, I was talking about how in different portions of the state, the parking demand is different. Yes.
Now, I'll split. I think I was sworn before, but I'm going to give some testimony.
No, you're not testifying.
You can't make a statement. Counsel,
Let me
third time
ask-
I've told you. You can't make a statement.
Let me ask him this way. Avalon Properties testifies about here tonight in Teaneck, on Windsor Road. You recall that? Talked about that?
Yes.
Do you know how many apartments there are in that apartment building?
There are over 200.
There are 248. Do you know how many parking spaces Avalon got permission to build from Teaneck? How many parking spaces they're providing for those 248 units?
No, I don't. I don't think it's relevant to this application.
It's 498.
Again, I'm going to...
Doesn't matter. Mr. Beach would like to make some statements on the record, doesn't make it testimony.
Do you think...
Supposed to ask a question of this.
Let me ask it this
Mr.
way.
Beach, I'm gonna, how should I say, give you the advice. Ask the question. Nothing else.
Do you think that the people who run Avalon Properties know what they're doing?
I'm going to
Sustain God. Let's not put God into this case, counsel. There's one attorney who's making an objection, that should be enough.
Now, I believe when you testified before, the chairman said that you started talking about turning the tax base around, page 140. Do you recall that?
Page what?
140.
Thank you.
You know, next time, Mr. Leach, if you want to vote for my transcript as an attorney, bring the transcript with you. Page, line, so it's very coherent. This is like all over the place. What page?
Page 140.
So I now have to go and look it up and find out exactly what it is.
This won't be that hard.
Go ahead.
Do you recall Mr. Meyer saying, that's not relevant? That's for the planning board. Do you recall that?
I'm looking at 140, page 140. No, I don't.
You don't recall the chairman saying, turning the tax base around is not an appropriate topic for the Board of Adjustment?
You directed me to page 140 of the transcript, and I don't see that.
140, line 2 through 6.
Not that question.
No, I don't see it.
What's your question?
You just have no recollection that Mr. Meyer said, talking about turning the tax base around is not appropriate for the Board of Adjustment. You don't remember that?
No, I don't. Okay.
Show him the transcript. That's how process and
Fine,
is done.
fine.
Show him the transcript.
We'll get the transcript. He doesn't remember. That's fine.
Yeah, but he can only remember if you refresh his recollection. That's how it's done. Were you here on May 16, 2019? Yes, I was. Do you recall I asked this question, that you said this, and somebody else said that? Yes, I recall that. Okay, isn't it true you said that? Well, he has to say yes if it says so. That's the way it's done.
Mr. Lydon, you testified about vacancy rates, apartment vacancy rates, correct?
I did.
Now, is it your testimony that as vacancy rates go down, the zoning laws should be adjusted more liberally to accommodate that?
I didn't testify to that. What I testified to was that it's a vacancy rate of 0.6% is a reflection of a very tight housing market, and there is then, as a result, a housing shortage.
So if apartments get tight, we should loosen up our zoning law. Is that right?
No question here.
No, there's a question. If the vacancy rates go down to 0.6, then we should loosen up our zoning laws and allow more variances.
I didn't say that. What I offered was that this board is empowered to grant variances to advance the public welfare, to advance the public good. The planning board adopts a master plan to advance the public welfare and the public good. And the mayor and council adopt zoning ordinances for the same reasons. If in a particular municipality, the vacancy rate in the rental market is less than 1%, almost half of that, 0.6, the A way to advance the public welfare is to provide additional rental development in appropriate locations under appropriate standards. That was the gist of my testimony.
Does it work the other way around? Let's say we have a market collapse, and now the vacancy rate is 40%. Should we say to this developer, you're entitled to 12, but you know what? We've got a lot of apartments in town. We're only going to give you 6.
I'm objecting.
Sustained.
Do you recall on page 148, this is just a question, do you recall Mr. Riemann asking on the board? He asked the question, why not just change the zoning requirements rather than go through 12 variances in this hearing? Do you recall
What
him
page is
saying
that? What page is that?
148?
I don't think I made reference to 12 variances, but
You recall the question? This question was simply, why are we killing ourselves on these hearings before the Board of Adjustment? Why don't we just change the zoning law?
I'm going to object to the question because he's characterizing what the transcript says, and I object to that.
Well, I'm gonna refer Mr. Lydon can read his answer back on page 148. I think it's and Mr. Beach can read it too. He answered that question.
The Board of Adjustment process is an honorable one. There's nothing wrong with the Board of Adjustment hearing the testimony and deciding to grant or not to grant an application. You do a job, and if the testimony is compelling, I assume you'll approve the application. It's not the only way to amend the land use in a community. There are other ways as well. And the boards of adjustment, generally speaking, are fairly busy because there's nothing wrong with taking an application to a board of adjustment. In fact, that's why a board of adjustment was created, was to hear applications presented by developers. So to suggest there's something wrong or bizarre about an applicant seeking a variance, I think is a fallacy.
And I'd like to get back to my question. And Mr. Reedman's question was, why doesn't Teaneck just change its zoning laws? And you answered, quote, you wanted to have explanations. You said, I've got two explanations. Quote, one, to build a consensus, and two, go through the process.
Wait, that's not what he said. You can't quote something inaccurately and put it on the record and say, that's a quote, I object to this.
Sustain, Mr. Beach, you're an attorney. I can't tell you how to do this, but other than saying that it doesn't work, you just make quotes that are not exact. You gotta take the transcript, read the transcript out loud.
May I have Ms. Murder's transcript?
No, you may not. You might bring your own.
Can't have her transcript?
Well, how is she gonna look at it? I mean,
Let me see if I can rephrase, I'll rephrase this question. It's not a hard
Mr.
question.
Beach, it's very simple. If you want to quote someone, bring the transcripts. That's how it works. If you have two transcripts, maybe you can share. But
I'm sorry, I'm sharing with my witness.
You keep it. All right?
but you
Your response, Mr. Lydon, to Mr. Reedman's question.
No, I'm going to object again because he's paraphrasing. He's not quoting. We have a transcript that has a question from one of the board members and an answer. It stands by itself.
statement. The answer was asked.
In giving
The
your...
question was asked by Mr. Reedman and was answered by Mr. Lydon.
Sir, did you use the term consensus?
I see the word consensus on page 149. I don't see it on 148. So I want to answer your question that you're asking, but I'm not sure I know what your question is.
Mr. Reedman was asking, why doesn't Teaneck just change its zoning laws?
Again, I'm going to object because he's interpreting what Mr. Reedman was asking. We have a transcript that has the exact question, and we have the exact answer.
Let Mr. Lydon read his answer.
Can read him the
Let Mr. Lydon read his answer.
What was the question? To read the question?
Yeah, let's read Mr. Reedman's question and Mr. Lydon's answer. That will be appropriate. I know. I'll give you the charge, Mr. Lydon, to read the question and the answer so Mr. Beach can, you know.
Reading from the Thursday, May 16th, 2019 transcript on page 148, line 4, Mr. Reedman asks, Mr. Lydon, I just have one question related to, it sounds like the master plan makes this compelling argument for a development of this type. I'm just wondering, based on your experience, do you know why, when there is such a compelling argument for this type of development, why towns don't change the ordinances so that it can be used as opposed to having dead areas? Just based on your general experience, why don't towns just follow through and make them relevant? And then the witness on page 148.
And that's you, Mr. Lydon, right?
Correct, line 16 responds. That's a very good question. And I think part of it is that the planning board is partly responsible for doing the master plan. And they have certain things they would like to say, typically to the plan use policy. I think with all due respect, that should have said land use policy, but it says plan use policy. And I continue. There are a host of things where mayor and council need to review. First and foremost is the budget, personnel. As borough attorneys will tell you, it takes some time for two things to happen. One, to build a consensus, and two, to go through the process. And on that point, the affordable housing buildings in New Jersey is 75. In 2015, the court gave towns 6 months of rent housing plans to get them approved by the courts. They're still doing it. Not a fast process. And because two different boards are involved, it takes longer. And that's why. That's part of the reason why there's a variance procedure available to developers.
Thank you, Mr. Lydon. Answer the question.
So you are saying that one of the two explanations is that township council needs time to build a consensus, and therefore, can't we conclude there is no consensus in Teaneck on these zoning changes?
I'm going to object.
Sustained. Next question.
Mr. Lydon, did you work on the Chestnut Street development project for the Ridgewood Board?
I'm going to object. It's not related to
Counsel,
correct testimony.
I can't believe I have to say this a fourth time. Asked about his testimony to this board, about this project. Fourth time.
This witness is testifying about building 68 units on .798 of an acre.
Your question, sir?
Right? So I would like to ask about a development that he testified in favor of in Ridgewood, where there were 43 units on 1.24 acres.
You cannot. Every application is independent. And top of that is from a different town. Move on.
Sure.
What are your fee arrangements, Mr. Lydon?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is it a contingent fee arrangement?
I object.
Highly inappropriate, counsel. Highly inappropriate.
No, I don't think it's highly inappropriate at all. At all.
Highly inappropriate.
I think we should know what the fee arrangement is.
Next question. Highly inappropriate.
Not inappropriate at all. No further
Highly
questions.
inappropriate, counsel. Next.
No further questions. No
Next.
further questions.
Go sit down. Highly inappropriate, sir.
Not
You
inappropriate.
should know that.
Okay. Who's next in line? Sir? Good evening. How we doing? Good.
You can take the mic out if you need to, sir.
It's up to you. State your name for the record.
Steve Savitz, S-A-V-I-T-Z, 1300 Alicia Avenue, Teaneck. Co-president, sorry?
Questions for the witness?
I'm co-president of the East 14 Neighborhood Association. We have 65 members and friends, and
You have the following questions of me.
yes, I will. Give me a minute. I'm still trying to figure out what just happened. I have a question, Mr. Lydon, that's really focused on the concept of limits and
Concept of what?
on intent.
I'm sorry, it's very good that I hold closer.
I have a question that's based on the concept of limits and intent, and I'll explain why in a minute. Given
I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
limits, L-I-M-I-T-S, and intent, I-N-T-E-N-T, okay? And I'll try to ask it as clear and as short as I can. What?
The microphone is distorted when you're saying it.
So is it better closer or further?
Closer.
Closer, okay. So the question is, given the extent of the variance asked for, how do you justify deviating so significantly from existing zoning laws without destroying the intent of the law as it's been written? And why aren't the variances asked for?
Sir,
Okay.
he has one question at a time, otherwise if he answers yes or no,
Okay, I'm
so
sorry.
objection has to form. Is that correct, Ms. Berger? Okay. So stay there, try again. What was the first
So
question?
was the question clear?
Could you ask it again?
Yes.
First question.
It said, given the extent of the variance asked for 100 State Street, how do you justify deviating so significantly from the existing zoning laws without destroying the intent of the law as written?
Well, first of all, in answer to that question, we are compatible with the use. The zone plan calls for multifamily housing. That's what we're proposing. So it becomes a question of degree. Degree, in my mind, has to be based on impacts. If you look at what we're proposing, I think well, it has to also be in context. And I think in context, there are other 5-story buildings in the neighborhood. Some of them are very old. Some of them are still under construction. Some buildings are taller, and some buildings have yet to be built but have been approved. So if you look at the context, this 5-story building, if it's approved, will not be out of context with its neighbors. As far as the impacts of the development, the census data shows that there are 2.38 people in a rental unit in Teaneck on average. So if we round that to 2.5, we have less than 70 apartments. If this application is approved as proposed and it is occupied by average households, the number of new residents in Teaneck would go up by a very small percentage. I testified the other day, in May, that there's about 40,000 residents in Teaneck. Many of the people who moved to this building may be Teaneck residents, so they'll just be changing addresses. So I think the relatively small number of people who are going to live in this building are not going to have an overwhelming impact. If you look at the traffic report prepared by the traffic engineers, the level of service stays pretty much the same. So what that means, not the level of service parameters, but if you're standing on the street before the building gets approved, if it does get approved or constructed, and afterwards, you wouldn't notice the difference on the street because the level of service, the delays incorporated with the traffic circulation pattern are basically the same. So traffic's not a big issue. We spent a lot of time talking about school-age children. One of the concerns in some municipalities in the past has been, well, if we approve this application, well, one can dispute maybe the exact numbers, but the numbers that I reviewed from the Department of Education indicate that this decade, the Teaneck School Board has seen its population decrease by 541 students. I believe that's a significant number. If you look at who lives in New Jersey multipliers and assume that something close to that is going to happen in this development, if it's approved and constructed, there will only be about 6 or 7 public school-age children residing in the building. So when you ask about the extent of the variances, I think you have to look about what the impact of those variances are. The impact is to take down a very ugly building that's been dead and obsolete and replace it with what I think is a very attractive, very well-articulated building, and it does something else. It provides a style or type, a contemporary housing option that generally is not found in Teaneck. The Verizon building is going up, we know that. The Palisade Avenue building is now up and is getting CO'd. The Avalon Bay building is getting CO. But except for those 3 buildings, if you look at the apartment buildings in Teaneck, by and large, they're older. And they don't have contemporary offerings that the market is looking for today. And I think if you look at the lack of available rental housing in Teaneck and the type of housing that's there, I think this housing development, if it's approved, will provide a new and different type of housing for rental people in Teaneck that actually, instead of creating a detriment, advances the public good and the public welfare. So I think these variances are very much approvable by this board.
Are you aware that there's not been, as of yet, an impact study that integrates your building in with the current buildings which are being built and are being built right now? And that the answer we've gotten at several other meetings is that we really don't know what the impact is going to be on traffic education. So your building is one building, and I realize it's independent.
I'm going to object because he's testifying now.
Let's get a question.
So the question is, are you aware that there has never been an impact study that integrates your building into the impact it's going to have on the growth of East Teaneck?
Well, let me say this. There have been impact studies prepared and presented on every project. They may not have looked at the other ones, but they weren't done in isolation. And the Teaneck Township Council has authorized a cumulative study of the projects, the developments that you and I are discussing, which I understand is in the works right now. But there really has been a study. What really is, it's not in one location. It's not in one document. But there have been studies, and I think you can cumulatively look at those.
I think I looked at all of those which currently exist, and my understanding is they all been done in isolation. But that's not a question. A part of this question gets at limits, Mr. Lydon. Are there limits in terms of how far you think you can deviate from the existing zoning laws in any construction?
Yes, you can. Yes, there are. And I think, to take it back to this property that we're talking about tonight, I think you have to start with the fact that there is a non-permitted, obsolete office building on the property that's a blight. I'll say it's a blight on the neighborhood. The second thing you have to take into consideration at the very outset of doing that analysis is, well, the application you're proposing, is it a conforming use or not? And that answer is yes, affirmative. This is a conforming use to the zone. So, in one hand, you're getting rid of a non-conforming use, and on the other hand, you are proposing a conforming use. And that modifies or adjusts or plays a large role in my mind in analyzing the impacts of the proposed development. And I think this is a very approvable application. It's also going to provide affordable housing for Teaneck. That's an important consideration, which again furthers the public interest.
Are you aware that the 60 members and friends of the East Frontier Neighborhood Association totally disagree with that
I'm
assessment?
going to object. Why?
Wait, if you want to ask one, and your turn comes up to the mic, then you can ask. But don't interrupt. It's late, please.
I don't know what's done. And why, given the extent of the variances, which you've gone over and tried to explain why is this not zoning by variance? Why, it's a similar question, why do we have to go through this kind of a hearing when those of us who come into the Board of Adjustment asking for an extension of our roof, our driveway, they're talking to us about feet and inches, and we're talking about 100. We're talking about a building.
I'm sorry, sir, I lost your question.
63 feet.
I lost your question. I'm sorry. I feel like
I tried to ask, why is this not zoning by variance? Given what I understand zoning by variance is, because what it is, in my mind, the question, why isn't it going around the zoning laws that exist by asking for variances far and above what the intent of the zoning law is? And that's just how we
That's your question.
That's it.
I can answer that, Mr. Chairman. This is not zoning by variance. One of the goals is to eliminate non-conforming uses. That is a bedrock, long-standing zoning goal. This application achieves that. So that is certainly a good thing. Another thing is boards and applicants are generally encouraged to come in with conforming uses. We are coming in with a conforming use. That, I think, is very relevant and very important and has to be factored in to the application.
This is my last question that came up. Are you aware that according to the testimony at a New Jersey Transit hearing that we had by Senator Wanda, it relates to
Ms. Berger, let this gentleman put his question on. Just try to do it short and concise. If you think that it's objectionable, object. I'll move on.
I'm referring to the statement by the New Jersey Transit Authority that they are at absolute capacity with no room for expansion for service in the 167, the 167T, 167Q, and the 167X. They have no buses, they have no...
I was saying, here's the question, are you aware, Mr. Lydon,
That's all.
New Jersey Transit, according to this question, are you aware that they are saying that they have no additional ability to provide additional service on 167, 168, and etc.? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I'm sorry. There was a lady in the blue. I'm sorry. Oh, you're next. No problem. Hi. Good evening.
Hi, Laverne Lightburn. Laverne Lightburn. Laverne Lightburn, Teaneck. Lightburn. Originally, I was getting up here to talk about that, so I'll just piggyback on that.
Question.
Question form.
Thank you.
The additional buses, and you mentioned that you are not aware, and also about the additional buses that will not be put in this district. With that being the case, you mentioned earlier, because you're the impact analyst, and you weren't aware of the streets and the impact of the traffic is causing as of now without your building. Now that you know what will you do? Do you plan on changing it now that you know that they're not going to be putting these buses in, and a lot of people, it's going to affect their livelihoods financially, because there's no way they're going to get to work. They're going to get to work late. Why is there objection?
Because
In terms of the question, now that you know that these are going to impact the community, are you planning to change your design? That's the question.
Okay, so there's a few problems with this. I'm going to sustain the objection. There's a few problems with your question.
Why?
First of all, I'll tell you. Give me a chance. First of all, the first question was not like the second question that we tried to rephrase, but that's the second part. I don't think Mr. Lydon testified in the beginning about what the premise that you set out for your question were.
When someone spoke earlier, he did mention he did not know. When he found out that it's over 700 units, he said he didn't know. So I'm
He didn't know what?
that he didn't know that it was going to impact, there was no impact study done or anything like
No,
that.
I think the testimony, and I will help you as
Don't
much as I
confuse me because my mind is messed up anyway. So
No.
specifically with what I'm asking.
I'm trying to help you.
All I want to know is now that he knows.
One at a time, please. I know you're excited, and I know you're tired, because I am too. But let the person ask and then answer.
I'm trying to help you. Yes, I think the question is, do you know about the cumulative effect of all these buildings, how that's going to impact the transportation? Is that the question?
Transportation. And
One question.
Okay, let's go.
Do you know that? The cumulative effect, do you know, sir, if the cumulative effect of these new buildings in town are going to impact the transportation to the city?
no.
Next question.
Earlier you said that question was answered, and they told him that it was going to affect it.
Well, I'm sorry, who told
Well, I
the
listened
line?
earlier to one of the people that spoke.
But that's not testimony.
Okay, then let's go switch.
But try, I will help you.
Okay, help me out while I do this. Did you or anyone in your firm make an observation of the stores where Walgreens is located, State Street and Teaneck Road? Because I have.
What is the question? For what purpose?
For what purpose?
No, I'm saying, what kind of observation are you talking about? Like for traffic,
For traffic, for
One
accidents,
thing at a time.
because there's many accidents, therefore police, services. That's really where I'm coming from. You did an impact, you're the person that is in charge of impact analysis.
I don't think
Is he
it's...
not?
No.
No, I know he didn't do it, but what, okay, let's start this.
Slow down.
Question. What is his job?
His job is the planning issue
Right.
in this.
Right.
Okay? So he's an expert, or they profile him as an expert in planning within the zoning.
Right.
Zoning laws.
Right.
Means how the impact of the zoning according to the zoning laws, for the positive criteria, negative criteria, etc. And he testifies as to what zoning is allowed in this area, and that changes.
So my question is, if this is his job, then I think I'm asking you, what impacts I'm looking for the impacts that other people see. I'm looking for a major, because a lot of things I heard you saying, no, I don't know, and I'm trying to understand, why don't you know that there's an impact in that Walgreens area? Why don't you know that there's an impact on the school district? I hear what your answer is, but do you know that Teaneck has a lot of special needs children in this community? And that is why you do not see, you think you're seeing those numbers go down, but they are not going down. The money is coming out of the school district. And that is, I'm worried about who is paying for these kids. He's telling us that it's only 6 kids.
So,
But who, I know we sell our taxes, but who, yeah, it's falling on us. It's falling on the,
so let me help you.
okay, so that's why I'm saying, this study that you did, someone needs to tell us the real figures. Because we as tenants living here, we know We, as property owners here, we know this is not the fact.
Okay, well, now you're just, arguing or testifying.
I'm not arguing.
Oh, you're
I don't feel like arguing.
But you're testifying as to certain things that you believe are facts.
So, I've been to a forum, an observation on the volumes in the store and the traffic. Where are the numbers?
I'd like to help answer this lady, but the traffic report was presented and there was testimony with regard to that. The board's traffic expert is going to testify, and you can ask him further, and I think that's what you're getting into. So if
We have the traffic.
you took that's traffic, not
Oh, the foot traffic, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the foot, I need to clarify that, I'm sorry. Foot traffic, because remember you mentioned earlier about the foot traffic. And I'm saying, we really don't need any more foot traffic.
What I was testifying to, Mr. Chairman, was some economic development strategies that municipalities throughout the area are developing. And when you come right down to it, the goal is to create more foot traffic on streets like Teaneck Road or Cedar Lane or Washington Avenue and Bergenfield. The idea is that people like to shop locally, and because traffic in New Jersey is what it is, they oftentimes like to walk. So the goal, the idea is, well, if we introduce housing into commercial areas, maybe the merchants who are struggling in this post-Amazon world will struggle a little bit less. So when you look at this development, and I don't know if it's 2 feet closer to the plaza or 2 feet closer to Teaneck Road, but this development is very well sited between those two commercial areas, and it would not be unexpected to have residents of this building shop locally. And why not go to Walgreens if you need diapers? You can walk out the door, you can push your child in the stroller, and you're there in a few minutes, as opposed to getting in a car.
So did you know that there's no parking in Walgreens anymore without the traffic now?
Just to be clear, Mr. Lydon talked about a particular strategy. He has not described a study that he has done. He has not described a study that anybody has done other than the traffic engineer. So there is no study that exists.
That's my problem.
Well, then you can express.
Wait.
Okay.
Your point is well taken. We hear it, and the public hears it, but you can't ask them about something that doesn't exist.
Okay, can you do or will you be doing a study that will include State Street?
What specifically kind of study?
I'm trying to get it out.
What is different kinds of studies?
I want to do, he says he's an impact analysis. How could you get impact analysis?
We're trying to help you here. We're trying to help you. There are all sorts of different kinds of studies. There are environmental studies, there are traffic studies. You are not traffic, but are you interested in determining? Let me talk, please. If I'm wrong, you can tell me where I'm wrong. I believe you are interested in finding if there is an impact study particularly related to foot traffic.
No, I'm interested in a study for impacting on the schools in my pocketbook and other people's pocketbooks. I'm interested in the foot traffic and the driving traffic because I see what it does at the 7 o'clock.
Okay.
I want to know, have you looked at it at, hello? Have you looked at it at 7 o'clock in the morning to the 9 o'clock hour? Did you do a study from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock? Those are the studies that I'm interested in. Are those people going to be able to?
Let's find out.
You want to know what the studies are?
Let's find out from the applicant. I think you've heard.
But he's not listening.
I think you've heard, Ms. Berger, perhaps.
I want to know about, are you going to do that study follow up?
Wait. I'm tired.
I'm tired too.
But we'll get on the record. Two people are talking at the same time.
I get where he's coming
No,
from.
but you gotta let him talk so the stenographer can pick up what you said, which is important.
So you can't, we're trying to get a specific question, or 2 or 3 or 5, but you can't ask a question that's got 5 or 10 different things in it. So specific, please, ma'am, please. I think you've heard this lady's question about the particular impact studies. Is your intent to provide that kind of impact studies to this board?
Well, I believe there has been a traffic impact study presented to the board.
Okay, is it your intention to provide to this board an impact study regarding the school overload or non-overload?
No, and the reason for it, Mr. Rosen, I don't want to be so rude to you, is that 2 things. One, according to the Department of Education numbers I looked at, Teaneck schools have a lot fewer students now than they did 10 years ago. And number 2, we did look at the typical multipliers for this type of housing in a 50 or more unit building, and the number of school children we could expect is about 6 or 7, less than 1 per grade.
So it's specifically, again, you give us evidence which is valid. Are you going to do an impact study of this project, particularly related to the educational issue? Yes or no?
I think we've done it, but I don't think there's anything more than we've done.
Can you do?
Well, let me continue this. Is it your intention to provide an impact study regarding foot traffic, other than your statement about foot traffic?
I think I'm going to be back, Mr. Rosen. I have a feeling I'm going to be back.
You will be.
Let me pledge to you that we will look at anticipated foot traffic.
Thank you. Is there any other kind of studies?
Can you look at? I really don't care.
No, we do care.
I know too many of these things.
Excuse me, I'm trying to help you. Listen here to me. Ma'am? That's okay, you can call me Dawn. My wife calls me something else. Okay. Anyway, so here is the question that I think also you're interested in, that really doesn't come to the purview of this board, and that's the financials. But I can tell you one thing. Building a building, if you're looking at the financials, and I leave the board, we are not really supposed to look at the money involved. But building a building like this, as opposed to the building that is there now, that generate very little taxes, this is going to generate multiple of taxes to the town and support the school system and do whatever, regardless how many kids there is, because the taxes that will come in from when they build the building and it's ready to be occupied, the taxes will multiply by many, many times than what it is now. But we don't take that into consideration. I'm just telling you that. So if you're worried that because of this building and because of all the other buildings that are going up now, will be a burden on the taxation and the income, money incoming coming to Teaneck, that will only have a positive, things go up.
Quality of life.
No, but you were asking about the money because you said my pocket, when I pay property taxes, some of us are property owners in town, and we all pay taxes, and we all know that it's very expensive and so forth. I understand that. But if you're worried about that, certainly this kind of development generates much more. You can ask Dr. Pruitt. I believe Dr. Pruitt was helping approve the Teaneck Road. So the Teaneck Road improvement by funding that comes from the building that was the Verizon building. I think that generated money so they could make a nice new pavement and sidewalks on Teaneck Road.
No, okay.
That's my understanding, but it doesn't matter because we don't take that into consideration.
Okay.
But I just want to let you understand that as well.
Please be quiet in the
So
board.
can you take into consideration again, when I go back to the school system, you cannot look at the numbers of what the actual kids that you see in the town, in that school. You have to include the numbers that are being outsourced.
That was his number, that was his testimony. As opposed to, I'm sorry, I didn't remember the other lady's name who came up here. The numbers he had also has children sent.
Out of district?
That go as a district as well.
Okay,
Trying to become.
And one more question.
Yes.
You gave us the 248 apartments and 498 parking. Did you realize that most people in Teaneck, since they're rich, most people in Teaneck have more than 2 cars? Most of these apartments will have, it's already tight over in that area where you can't find parking. But it is more than 2 cars. But see, this is, what I don't understand is, how do you build things and without having an idea of where you're going with it?
Mr. Chairman,
Where these numbers coming from?
I have to have an idea of where these numbers are coming from.
And that's what I'm trying to say.
And I test.
No, but listen to
That's
the
what
answer.
I'm saying.
I do want to hear your
No, you don't believe him. I've been sitting here all night waiting, and now you're leaving. I testified at the last time, Mr. Chairman, I can probably not find my notes as quickly as I would like to, but I believe my testimony was that all housing units in Teaneck, the number of cars, according to the 2017 census data, was exceptionally low. I believe it was on the magnitude of 1.04. And I'm looking for the census data I had earlier because
1.04 cars per person.
You said what?
I don't know, I'm trying to, 1.04 cars per person. Per household. 1.0, let's get the number.
That's the hell and a half.
Yes.
Can you get data for Teaneck alone? Because, but Teaneck definitely, you don't want to speak 4 cars per person, per house. So let's get real.
I agree, that's.
Where are you getting these numbers?
my numbers, according to the United States Census Bureau.
You can't go by that.
Well, then I guess I shouldn't do a study. I'll just make it up.
Answer the question.
He said 12.04.
Well, what, again, was it, Mr. Lydon, we'll take your word, that was 1.04. Are you talking about per, cars per household?
Yes.
All right, well, you don't need to get an exact number. It could be 1.4, it could be 1.04.
So much, again, before I leave, I'm going, but before I leave, one question. I didn't hear you say that if you find that these other impact studies impact this community, you're going to change your design? I'm asking.
Excuse me, I want to answer
Okay.
the previous question.
Okay,
So if I
the
can,
parking first.
I'm looking at the selected housing characteristics 2017 American Community Survey published by the U.S. Census. My number was for occupied housing units, they have no vehicle available, 1 vehicle available, 2 vehicles available, 3 or more. 43.4 occupied housing units have 1 or less vehicles available in Teaneck, and the number is 5,708 for housing units out of the 13,957 occupied housing units. No, 13,316 occupied housing units. 5,700, almost 5,600 have 1 vehicle or less.
So if we can prove that wrong, can you pay me? Because I can let's say, I'm just saying, I can prove that wrong in that street.
So,
I'm saying, where are these figures coming from? But I'm just saying, we're all time.
They're coming from the 2017 census.
Did you make a study?
Oh, I know I'm out in those streets. Unlike him, I'm out.
All over Teaneck.
Oh, yes, I am. Anybody in this room can tell you, I'm out there. Oh, he's allowed to, all right. But if we can prove that wrong.
Okay, so you have all the right to do that. Next time you come back, the next meeting, you bring an expert that proves it wrong.
And then you would change your design? If it's
No,
not
that's not the
a-
answer. The answer is listen to me. Instead of walking away,
Oh, no, I can do it.
instead of walking away, so here is the point. If you can prove with reasonable certainty by an expert in the field, you do a census, who's a real expert, that these numbers are wrong, then you debunk his testimony. Then you make points, as opposed to, so some people make more points and some people make less points about this man's testimony. And that's the way you can beat his testimony. But just to say, hey, man is wrong because I know that it is not right, that's not credible to a
Well, it would be
expert.
credible if I did my own census and went door to door and get the information for him.
So you have to do that for the entire Teaneck and make sure that...
Teaneck or the Northeast Teaneck.
No, this is for entire Teaneck. And you have to make sure that everything is right and it's certified by somebody.
Hey, I tried.
You did well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Ms. Berger is tired.
It's 4 houses, 4 cars per house in this place.
We're all tired. I gotta work tomorrow for the town.
Good evening, Madam Mayor.
Okay, how many minutes do you think you're gonna
Be
be?
quiet and voice house.
Okay, shh. How long are you
I don't
gonna
know, sir.
be?
But,
What's your name?
Lois, Lewis. And I will apologize ahead of time if I slur my words and get tired. Okay. First,
Would you like to have a question, Mr. Lydon?
yes. Mr. Lydon, you stated this, and I hope I put it correctly. It said mayor and council changes the zoning code for a certain area. But what were you defining when you said that?
I was talking about 1500 Teaneck Road, also known as the Verizon Building. I was also talking about the World of Wings, also known as the Avalon Bay property.
So you weren't defining spot zoning?
Oh, no, not at all.
All right, I have a question regarding your higher education. Did you ever take a course in probability?
Statistics? Probability?
Statistics.
Yes.
It's usually required, right? Okay. Now, if members of council own commercial property in the plaza area, would you say in all probability, with 28 units of residents, maybe about 136 residents, it would be quite profitable for their businesses?
I'm going to object to the question.
Sustained. Next question.
All right. Okay.
Good try.
Regarding your testimony on May 16th, you said council, one of your reasons council would be for council to be a regarding, I guess, I forget what you were talking about, the zoning or something. You said it was two, it was, go back to what Attorney Beach was asking about. There were two reasons. One was council to be a consensus, or something, you said something like consensus.
Right, there's a planning board and a mayor and council, and they're two different bodies, they have two different jobs, and sometimes it takes a while to get consensus amongst different bodies as to what you go forward.
Okay, so my question was consensus concerning the residents of the area, or consensus of the council, or consensus of the planning board? So you said the consensus of the council wasn't the consensus of the residents of the area regarding the redevelopment.
It was consensus among the two bodies, the two policy-making bodies of Teaneck,
Okay,
who have different functions.
all right. That wasn't my first question, but it is my first question.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last comment. First question?
And that was my first question now. Okay. I asked this question last time, and I was told, well, this is a planner question. So I'm
Okay.
going back to that.
Oh, that's what you mean. Go ahead.
Since your development is asking for a 9.9 foot setback, a feet setback in the front, when you're required to have a 30 feet setback from the front, is that possibly why there's no front play area for children?
No. Whether the setback was 9.9 or 15 or 25, I would recommend my client not put a play area in the front yard next to traffic. And also, the front yard is the one most closest to the street, and I hate to say it, but it's also one that could be vulnerable as opposed to someplace else. So that has nothing to do with a playground in the front yard.
All right, and going back to the testimony by the witness, Minsky, his name? Zumiski?
Town expert.
Town
Oh,
expert.
the town expert. Thank you.
But he's
Oh, all
not.
right, okay.
Oh, well, this is on page 17, starting at line, I believe, is 13. He stated, there's also a flex space on the lower level that is open and can be utilized as a children's play area as well as that's internal to the building. And then the question is it your opinion that in this specific site, it's best to have a children's play area within the building rather than exterior? And the answer was, yes, I agree. He said, I think this internal area where you have watch over the children is a better alternative.
Ma'am, is there a question?
Yes, there is a question. All right. This is my question.
Go ahead.
It takes a while to get to, but it's my question.
It's okay, we know.
According to Jerry Newberry of the United States National Education Association Health Information Network, Jerry Newberry, Newberry, of the United States National Education Association Health Information Network. Here he states, poor indoor environmental quality contributes to serious health problems for students, including asthma, allergic reactions, fatigue, headaches, and respiratory tract infections. Now my question is, explain how the ventilation of your indoor play area will allow fresh outdoor air to seep into so that pollutants swirling indoors won't contribute to the serious health issues I just mentioned.
I'm going to object. It has no relation to his direct testimony.
And an architect is testified, so it's an engineer.
Can't hear you.
Ma'am, an architect has testified, or also an engineer. That question would be appropriate for them. It's been generally the planner. That's not a planner's question.
And you said that the engineer had already testified?
The engineer testified and an architect. That would be a
Okay, so
question.
they didn't mention anything about the health of the children who are breathing?
I don't have that record in front of me.
All right, then I'll just use it for my children. Okay, my next question. All right. You cited two of the towns and stated about multifamily, the size. You said some of the court desires, you have this, as long as it doesn't impinge on the neighborhood, something to that effect.
I'm not
Ma'am,
sure.
I know you said about it wouldn't impinge on the neighborhood. You used that term, I know, I wrote it down. All right, so explain how the 68 units that you plan to construct when you're only allowed 9 units, how it will not impinge on increased traffic congestion.
Ma'am, that's also a question that would be more, that would be appropriate for the traffic study expert. We had a traffic study expert.
Well, he mentioned about,
That's
he
not-
did mention that, well, you know, you won't be using any cars because they can use the bus and things like that. Now, we found out from Ms. Weinberg, Senator Weinberg, that there won't be extra buses available, so there will be a congestion on the public transportation. So my question now is, well, do you think perhaps they would now use their cars so they won't be able to use the public transportation? And that would now impinge on congestion?
I'm going to object to the question because he's not the transportation expert. There was testimony, and the town expert will be getting up at some point.
It's a state.
Okay, let's go to the feet on the street. How will the,
Foot traffic.
well, he called it feet on the street. I'm using his
I
term.
couldn't hear you. It was just-
I'm just repeating his term of feet on the street. Okay, so my question is, for the 68 units, probably 136 or more people with feet on the street, how will that impinge upon the denser population?
I think you misunderstood the intent of my testimony there. Maybe I can do a little bit better this time. I was talking about planning theory and some economic downtown revitalization theory that recognizes that in the post-Amazon world, retailers And in fact, business districts are suffering mightily. And the planning field and a lot of other fields are trying to come up with relevant strategies to make sure that resources and assets such as Cedar Lane and Teaneck can survive and thrive for the next 20 years. And one of the ways we are trying to formulate a response is to get more feet in those downtown areas. And one of the ways we're trying to do that is by introducing housing into downtown areas where zoning, planning, zoning ordinances through a great many towns have prohibited residential development in downtown environments. People used to live above their shops back in the 20s and 10s. Zoning came along in the 50s and 60s and basically said, we don't want people living on top of the shops anymore. What we are now doing is attempting to reverse that and say, maybe they were right. Maybe we made a mistake in the post-Amazon world, and the goal is to provide a local customer base so that hopefully people will shop downtown and people will dine downtown. How does that relate to this property? This property is very close to two distinct shopping areas, retail areas. And your master plan has talked about trying to revitalize your downtown areas. It's one of the goals of the master plan. And so what I'm suggesting is that one of the ways this application, if it's approved and constructed, can enhance and further the public interest is by providing new households in close location, close proximity to where they can just walk out the front door and shop locally. So that is the purpose of my talking about feet on the street. It's not to impinge on somebody. It's in fact just the opposite. It's hoping to help revitalize one part of the strategy to help revitalize some of the commercial areas, especially the ones that are walkable to this site. And we all know State Street is flat, it's got sidewalks. It would be very easy to go out your front door and turn right and go to the Walgreens Center and those other shops and restaurants, or go left and go to Queen Anne Plaza and go to those shops, banks, and stores. That's what that comment was about.
Okay, so this is my next question, we follow up with that. First, state in land use law, Article 9, zoning board of adjustment, no variance may be granted under the terms of this section, including a variance involving inherently beneficial use without a showing that such variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and the purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. So again, my question is, with your feet on the street, would you say there would be a denser population in the shopping areas with the feet on the street?
Yes, and I would say that's a good thing. Excuse me, I'm allowed to answer your question.
You said yes.
I wasn't done. I wasn't done.
Sir, you done with your answer?
Yes, it's a finish.
Whoa.
Okay.
You done with your answer?
Yes, I am, sir.
Question?
All right, my next question. Again, it's a question. Now, in 2001, there was a traffic study that was done. The Chief Teaneck was the chief at the time of the police department. He was writing to Lieutenant Robert Carney. And it states here, I have attached a copy of the traffic volume survey, which was conducted by the County of Bergen in 2001. Now, he did say that it won't impact traffic. He did say that tonight. The survey was conducted at Teaneck Road and State Street, and the property is to be on State Street, which is a feeder street to Teaneck Road. It was an 8-hour survey that yielded 14,624 vehicles on an 8-hour survey study. My question is, with the 68 units, with probably 136 plus people with 2 cars, making it what, 200 and what? 82 vehicles additional to the 14,624 624. Is that a possibility?
I'm going to object to the question because I don't even,
Sustained, the traffic study in 2001, how do we know that it exists today?
No, my question is that with with 2019, would there be an increase? Do you think? That's a probability. Oh, I'll do that again at the end. All right, let's see what else I have. Oh, yes, this one. He referred to an article in the New York Times that discussed the fertility rate. And my question here is, what areas were mentioned in this particular article?
The nation.
They just said nation.
Yes.
So when we do the statistics, we talk about the nation, you might have one area high, another low. So they're just taking the median, is that correct? He said it's the statistics, so that's another. All right, let's see what else I have. Oh, that's okay. One of your variances, where the height permitted is 35 feet, it's the proposed building height 86.02 feet. Then it says here, need height to roof line, need height to parapets, need height to top of mechanical shaft. Now, is that in addition to the 86.02 feet?
I don't know what you're reading from.
This is from the zoning officer, one of your variances, I'm sure you have it.
Well, could you tell me what you're reading from?
I'm reading from a document produced by the town zoning officer. You have, yes, you have 12 variances.
1 second.
And I'm referring to.
Don't be so competitive. Don't be so competitive. No, because we're trying to, Ms. Berger is asking to see what document you're referring to. Show her, and then we can have a much more coherent question. Is that the application, is it proposed application? Well, I don't know.
Okay, so this is a report dated 12, a document issued by someone dated 12/5/2018 saying the application is incomplete.
Okay, I have a question.
Is that by the zoning officer?
It's not signed.
I'll withdraw that question for now and ask him, will he please read to me from the zoning officer the variance regarding the height of the building? Will he read that to me?
Are you asking how high the building is going to be?
I'm asking, can he read to me what the zoning officer gave him regarding the height of the building?
I don't think this witness got anything from the zoning officer. What maybe you can ask him is, what is the height of the building?
Okay, the question is, okay, do you first put in an application to the zoning officer?
He didn't, I'm sure he didn't do that. I'm sure
I mean, the office or whoever?
I don't think.
Is that the process?
Yes, no.
Okay.
The process is the attorney goes and gets the client or the applicant prepares an application with the attorneys, and they submit it. They get a denial letter. They say, okay, now we're gonna file an appeal, which is before this board, to appeal some of the denials in connection with zoning.
Okay.
They hire a whole team, they got an expert in engineering, and they, to testify, they have a planner, they have all these things in order to.
All right, now I understand. So my question now is, what caused the application to be denied? Or can you tell me what caused the application to be denied?
I'm sorry, what caused this application?
Yes,
to be denied?
yes.
All the variances that you're here for tonight.
So can you name the one dealing with height?
So you're asking him what the requirement is for the height variance? What's the deviation?
What's the requirement and what's the deviation he wants for that particular? Yes.
Just on height we're talking.
Just height, that's all we know, yes.
What's the question, I guess, the question to you, sir, is, what's the height of the building? What's the height of the building?
73.25 feet,
What's allowed in the zone?
35 feet.
So the variance would be, what do you get in that?
What's the difference between them?
So my question is, he said 73 what?
73.25.
Does that height include roof line?
It's to the top of the roof.
I believe,
The top of the parapet has a different height, it's not included within the calculation for needed for the variance.
There are certain calculations that doesn't apply to the height.
Okay.
And a mechanical may not, at certain things, and the zoning officer was here earlier, he knows all the things, he's the one who measured it out according to the plans, and that's what we go by.
Okay, so what you're saying then is 73, whatever you said.
73.2.
You have not included the height of the parapet or the mechanical shaft or the other part. That hasn't been included.
That is not included in that number, correct?
That's right. So when the building is complete, it will be above the 73 point. Is that correct?
Not the way you measure height,
That's not
but it may
the way
be
you
the
measure height.
parapet goes over, mechanical equipment is above that.
It will be above that. That's
Could
my
be like
question.
the other buildings, I understand that Verizon is approximately 66 feet and the Avalon is 70 feet.
Right, so let's say, so this is the building here. And then you have your parapets and whatever else on the building, it will be above the height. That's what you're saying, right? This is 73, you may have something else on it.
Above the top of the roof line.
I
That's
think,
right.
and the roof line is also, there's a calculation on cylinder, a slanted roof. It is very complicated how to calculate
All
it.
I'm trying to
But
visualize.
I think this is not the question for this planner. It's really the architect who designed all the parapets and the roof line and all that stuff. That's the one who really asked the question.
If Ms. Lewis comes to the office Monday, they will show you as the zoning officer, lead you to explain how he came to that.
We'd be happy to accommodate your
That
questions.
is higher than 73.
Okay?
And if I could just help you for a second, if you go to the definition of height in your ordinance, and that definition is in section, and I'm going to help you for 1 second. In the definition section in ordinance number 23, if you go down to the definition section of height, it has a specific section on what is not included in height, and that includes silos, churches, spires, belfries, cupolas, mechanical penthouses, domes, chimneys, ventilators, skylights, water tanks, bulkheads, television antennas, and it goes on and on and on.
That's all I'm trying to understand. So now I understand it now that the building will be the 73 whatever, but there will be much more up higher.
and just like any other building, when Mr. Rosen asked me the height of a building, we ignore all that other material as well.
So all other buildings have the same thing above, or similar.
Okay. You had mentioned also about, you seem very pleased that you're going above the 10% of the affordable housing. You say you're going to 15%.
I wouldn't say pleased, I would say that that's a further indication of how this application furthers the public good and furthers the general welfare, yes.
Okay, so are you aware of the township-wide mandatory set-aside which states a multifamily development is required to include an affordable housing set-aside of 15% if the affordable housing will be for rent? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am, and I'm also aware that it doesn't apply to this particular application.
Why not?
Because there is no ordinance in town that requires it. And in New Jersey, we've moved to a time of application. So once an application is filed, the ordinances that are in place when the application is filed are what counts. At this stage, Teaneck does not have an affordable housing ordinance, to my belief, but we have done it because we know that's where the township is going.
So what does it mean when it says town-wide mandatory set-aside?
It means when they adopt an ordinance, if they adopt an ordinance, if they enter into a settlement agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center, new developments would be required to provide that. Rather than wait, or rather than ignore it rather, we are willing to provide that 15% when in the past the township has required, when they required any at all, a 10% set aside.
Even though we don't have the ordinance enacted in town, you're still doing it.
Correct.
And you're meeting the 50% set aside?
Yes.
Thank you.
In order to advance the public good and welfare.
Okay.
Okay, this is my final question.
Final question.
Final question, yes.
Remember that.
All right. You mentioned about your building 68 units that you want, even though it's only there for 9 units. So you pointed to 1,500. You pointed to Avalon Bay. You pointed to 140 Station Street, which is not even there yet. And that line of reasoning, because of that, you feel that your building should be there. I'm not finishing my question.
Question.
Okay. Would you say your line of reasoning is similar to Donald Trump's reasoning when he stated he didn't allow blacks in his building because the other developers didn't allow blacks in the building? So my question is, are you going along the same line of reasoning?
I object. I find it an appropriate question.
That's my last question.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're gonna, it is now about 20 minutes to 12, a little more than that, actually. It is now 11:40. Okay, I think we're gonna be done. Yeah, I know you're waving to me when you have to come. You're smiling, that's nice. Come back for a hearing. We continue. I guess next meeting of this matter will be heard on August 1st, 2019 at the regular chambers or somewhere else will be announced if it's changed at 7 o'clock or soon thereafter without further notice to the public. Being that it's now 11:41 and a very late evening, if somebody wants to speak to good and welfare, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Each.
Good welfare, it's going to go on applications that are not. So you're going to speak about whatever you like. However, if you want to speak about this particular application, the board will not consider it. It's good and welfare. Comments about this application shall be reserved at the point of the time for this application. So if you're going to speak about this application, wait until the end of the application.
Can I ask who among those who intend to speak to good welfare will comment upon this application? Okay.
Nobody wants to speak about this application.
Okay.
Okay. 1 minute is what at this time of the night, I'm going to allow people to speak, unfortunately.
Morris, not to speak, is this going to go on record?
This is going to go on record.
It's a statement that I'd like to read.
It's a statement about this, it's a statement about this application.
Yes, it is.
We can't consider it in evidence. We
We're
can't.
off doing it at the end of the application.
Well, consider your statement is about this application.
Should we do it today?
We will take statements. We must take statements.
But not now.
But if you tell us now, we're not going to consider it.
Okay, because this is the fourth time that I'm coming back.
Well, ma'am.
Thank you for coming every time, I appreciate it. Anyone else?
Please, the meeting's not over yet. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is not over yet. If those of you who spoke, we gave you the consideration, we expect you to do the same.
Number one, this is the township of Teaneck. This is the township of Teaneck, not the city of Teaneck. They've been used, that Teaneck is a city. We are a town. And number two, one of the main reasons that there's no business going on Cedar Lane is because the stores, the rent is very high, and a lot of people can't pay it. The other thing is, years ago when you had a store in Teaneck, the mayor came out, they had a ribbon cutting, and people knew that we had a store. There have been many stores now that have come into Teaneck, and nobody knows they're there.
I
Okay, so
suggest you should go before the council and say, and speak to this issue and say the same comments, tell them about it. I think it's a great idea. Very good point.
I go to every council meeting, so thank you.
You are the council member? Yes, there's good welfare, the mayor's there, everybody's there, and I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you. Yes, go ahead. No, first put your name on the record. I'm sorry, ma'am.
That's Vicky Shalam. S-H-I-L-A-N. You're welcome. Mickey is M-I-C-K-I.
Go ahead.
I'm Debbie Eliyahu, E-L-I-Y-A-H-U.
Would you like to say?
I actually have a question. It's about the